Hey guys, this is Shannon with Bare Metal Tech, and today we're taking a look at the newest Fractal Design case, the MEshify S2. Now the S2 should be pretty familiar to you if you've seen the Define S2, or like recently the Define R6. So basically Define R6 kind of set the stage for a new performance capability for Fractal Design cases. They have always been really just kind of closed off flat doors like you see on the R6 or the S2 or even the R5 before that. They've always been very minimalistic style. So focused on sound, focused on, inaudibility, basically creating a good performing case, but overall kind of a blank slate, not a whole lot of action happening with it. Well, the MEshify series started with like the MEshify C. Basically, it was something that kind of broke the mold for Fractal. It is a case that has a full mesh front instead of the flat solid door that looked like a kind of a brushed aluminum feel. Well, this one carries that same design aesthetic. Basically, this one takes a body from a Define S2 and creates some MEshify style magic on the front of it. So they took and slapped a MEshify front cover on a Define S2. Now, there is some glaring omissions in my opinion. Obviously, all this stuff is kind of my opinion on how I feel about this. But overall, they have a really good performing case with a few things I wish could have been done better. So let's go ahead and dive in, take a look at this thing, and see exactly what it does offer. And here we have the front of the Fractal Design MEshify S2. As you can see, it has the angular, stealth-inspired mesh that the MEshify series has become known for. I think overall, it gives it a good design aesthetic, something not so simple that's just flat and plain, but definitely something that has a little more texture, a little more feel to it than just your standard like mesh front case. It's not just something flat. Overall, it creates a nice design aesthetic, creates a good look for anyone looking to get this kind of airflow along with a solid build quality case. The front I/O is probably one of the first things I really have an issue with this. So let's go over it first. You have your headphone jack, microphone jack, USB Type-C, that's USB 3.1 Gen 2, power switch, reset switch, and dual USB 3.0 Type A connectors. Now, if you've seen the Fractal Design Define S2, you will know that it has USB 3.0 dual Type A, it has a Type-C, and it has dual USB 2.0. So basically, for the same price, you're getting a MEshify front case, but unfortunately, you are omitting some of the connectivity. Now to some, it may not be a big deal, oh, USB 2.0, who cares, don't use it. But at the end of the day, I personally have a Define R6 that I use in my system, as my main system, and it does have 4 connectivity ports on top. And I would love to have the Type-C added on mine without omitting the USB 2.0 ports. So I really wish they had kept the S2 front, the S2 front I/O, so that this whole thing could be similar and have 5 connectivity ports, 2 2.0, 2 3.0, and the 3.1 Gen 2. That would be a major bump up, I truly believe. I think this is something that was kind of a glaring omission because they actually had to make this piece. The other part of it, you'll notice there's no lines. This is all part of the front panel, and that means they made this MEshify front panel and front I/O, which comes off with this front panel. They made that piece instead of possibly reusing the piece from the S2. That's a big sticking point for me. That bothers me a lot because there was a ton of capability of being able to have a lot more connectivity, have it directly attached to the front so that you can pull the front panel. We're going to pull it off so you can see real quick. Now I know I mentioned filtration before, so it's a good note while we go to pull the front panel. The bottom filter is actually great. When you go to pull it, you can see it comes out right there, and you can pull the whole thing. The full-length filter all comes from directly below the case, and that means that it covers for everything from the PSU all the way across the front for any fan mounting down below that PSU shroud. That is something that we'll be taking a look at shortly. But that filter covers all of it, so you don't have to worry about multi-piece filters or any of that stuff about getting behind your case. It all pulls out from the front. Now let's go ahead and get this front end off. One thing you'll notice is once you get that filter out, you have some push tabs And the mesh front end comes out pretty much without an issue. You got to push tab across the bottom. And once you expose that, you can kind of see the meat of this. Now, you have two included 140mm fans, which are worth taking a peek at. As you can see, there is dual 140mm front fans, and there's even one included on the rear. So that's actually pretty good for a case at this price point to offer 4 solid, good quality fans, not like junk. Obviously, they don't have RGB. One thing with Fractal is they kind of let you build it the way you want. Now, let's go ahead and pull this front panel off so you can see other stuff I'm talking about. Now, we have the front panel pulled off. It just has some plastic clips. And you can see the front panel can't really go anywhere. The most I could do is flip it up slightly, maybe about 90 degrees, maybe a little more. But overall, it is solid mounted to the front of the case. Now, that's a problem for many reasons. First of all, let's say you want to pull off the front to adjust or install radiators, or pretty much any sort of maintenance that you might want to do. This is going to inhibit your ability to do so without some major potential roadblocks. So as we take a look down, you can see, we go to pull, you can't really get a whole lot of movement. The most you can do is move it up and out, which means if you go to install fans or a radiator here, you potentially scratch this. You've got like this really shiny plastic across the front, which is admittedly a fingerprint and dust magnet. And it is definitely something you want to consider when building in a case like this, because if that front panel is solidly attached, that means you're going to want to do everything installation-wise up front before you decide to install all the cabling to your front panel, front I/O, all that stuff, because once it's installed, I really doubt, especially with cable management, you're going to want to pull that all out of your system just to be able to pull the front panel off to install some liquid cooling later or things like that. For the most part, you can get to access to most of the screws. The two that are really going to be a problem, actually, we could take a look at real quick. You have this front tray right here. That is completely removable. We'll go ahead and take a quick turn of the case here. This front panel is completely removable right there. And that allows for very large expanses of radiators, stuff like that, or even let's say tube reservoirs and whatnot, but you have to be able to remove that. Well, the screws for that, I'm spin this back here so you can see. The screws are right there and right there. So when you go to pull this panel off, you'll notice one of them is visible, the other one is not. So you got to pull that panel away to be able to finagle possibly cabling, hooking up stuff for the bottom, pretty much what have you. But there's some things you definitely got to consider when you're building in a case like this. Now, we've kind of got those gripes out of the way. Those are probably the major kind of hiccups I see with this case. Now, there's some really cool stuff, like for instance, the Moduvent that you guys may have seen, which is this ventilation out the top, or at least that's what they call the one in like the Define R6. This one basically has a similar play on that. Push that. That button releases the top. Then you get this guy out of here. Once again, it is angular mesh. Yay, it focused on the first try. We're good. Okay, so that can obviously be blown out. Then you've got all this mounting across the top. Now do keep in mind, you can fit your 120 based mounting and no real issues. You can fit some all the way up to 360 rad. You can also fit technically 140 based rads here. However, it comes with a caveat. There is some clearance issues where you might be limited to about, I think it's around 36 to 38 millimeters, which I can obviously throw it in some text on post if this is wrong. But 36, 38 millimeters of height, which means most of your DRAM modules are going to be a problem. Most of your RAM will be too high and potentially be inhibited by, or inhibit the ability to install radiators. So that could be a potential issue. If you have something like Dominator Platinums, you can remove the top bar, but that's an aesthetic piece. Obviously, if you get Dominator Platinums, you probably want to see them. So that means you'd probably want to stick to a 120 based radiator across here. Also, there is a fill port hole here, which is kind of neat. Something I haven't seen. I mean, I've seen it in some of the Fractal cases, but haven't seen largely used in a long time because Fill ports used to be really popular in the old soft tube setups. Not so much with a lot of people going hard tube, but still it's a cool addition that is optional if you want to use it. Now this whole tray is really cool. It can actually be pulled out. You take these 4 screws out, this whole thing lifts out. You can mount your radiators and everything and then just drop it in. That's a nice addition. Quite a few case manufacturers have kind of went this way. Thermaltake kind of, I believe, was one of the first ones I saw actually utilize like a removable tray, but it's really cool to see it make it across because I love doing water cooling. I love things that make life a lot easier. And there's nothing worse than reaching your hand under something like this, like going around from this side, holding up a radiator just to try to screw it in, especially if you're going through fans, like if you're a push-pull setup and you're trying to run a long screw through a fan, both holes of the fan and the radiator. That can be a big time pain. So it's really cool to see where you can remove this, build it all on your desk, and then be able to transplant it to the case and then just hook up your tubing and go. That makes life a lot easier, even with AIO users. Something like your, let's say H150i, you know, the like 360, the 360 based AIOs where maybe they might be kind of a handful to install normally. You can put them up there without much of an issue. Jumping inside the case now, you can see we have a full-length PSU shroud. This allows you to hide away the PSU because obviously it's not always the most aesthetic or pretty piece within your build. This allows it to hide it away along with tuck some cables up under here if there's some you're not using. And then of course it has a cutout we mentioned before, which allows large radiators, other cooling products like reservoirs or whatnot to go down and occupy this area. Because if you're running a radiator that is thick enough, you're probably talking like an old Fess or Monster radiator that's that fat to actually take up that space. There's also mounting for 2 fans down there, so you could even run up to a 280 mil radiator. However, I wouldn't necessarily advise that because even without this plate in place, what are you really going to be cooling? I mean, you don't really, I've never really seen a lot of purpose in bottom mount radiators. It just seems kind of silly to me when you have front and top. So I digress. It's something that is there, but I just am not 100% sure the usefulness. Taking a look at the front, right behind the 2 pre-installed 140mm fans, you have this right here. This is all slotted and allows you to use the included brackets to mount reservoirs. So if you have a reservoir with side clamps, you can actually take and install the brackets and then snap in the reservoir with no issues and no having to drill your case. There's pre-mounted, there's pre-drilled, pre-slotted holes here. There's pre-drilled mounting for pumps, things like that. A lot of stuff that's really cool and kind of makes it much easier to build a liquid cooling system, which is a cool shift for Fractal. Fractal has not really done a lot of liquid cooling support, in my opinion, in the past, and I really like to see it heading this direction. Now, another thing I did kind of miss and I wanted to mention was right here on the ports that you see in the PSU Shroud itself, you can see you have some cutouts here. Those are made for slotting in the 2.5-inch bays that you see, you'll see on the back panel once we open that up. That is actually really nice because it allows you to install SSDs directly on the PSU tray. If you have some you want to show off, something like maybe the RGB based SSDs that like come from like Kingston or like Team Group, there's some pretty flashy things. And if you like RGB, this is kind of an add your own case. You'll notice there is no RGB by default. All the fans are black. It is all blacked out, but it's kind of an add your own RGB, add your own flavor. You build it how you want. Now let's go ahead and flip around to the back. Let's take a look at some of the cable management. Now another thing worth noting, since we're pulling this back panel off, we're gonna go ahead and get up in here, unsnap it, because you can notice there's a thumb screw hole there. This has thumb screws for affixing the panel. However, you will see it has a ball and socket style connector. So when you push this in, it will snap into place, and for most people, you won't even need the thumb screws. They simply hold the panel, they retain it really well, but if you want it, you can screw the thumb screws in. Otherwise, ball and socket does a really good job of holding this, and then it's got pinched metal up front, so it kind of swings open, kind of like a door, but not 100%. I'm going to set this panel to the side, and we're going to take a look at what else is going on with this case. Now, this thing has probably one of the, or I don't know if it's the biggest, but a huge opening. So this thing goes almost all the way to the rear I/O. I mean, you can see the solder points for the rear I/O. If you cannot access your back plate with this case, you got something wrong, or your motherboard is a very weird design, because I tried multiple motherboards. Every single one of them was easily accessible. Now, as you scroll down here, you will see another thing worth noting. The PSU slides in through the back. It has a retention bracket. The Platimax Dust Free, actually, the fan grill itself exceeds the normal ATX size. It sticks out a bit and will not install with the fan grill installed. I actually had to pull the fan grill off just to get our test power supply slid in here. So that was kind of interesting. It's quite snug fit, but it is designed to fit ATX power supplies. Something I'm gonna have to check with Intermax about exactly how or what's going on with them exceeding that normal width or normal thickness of the power supply. Now, these are all individually sleeved cables. As you can see, the Fractal tie straps do a good job of keeping them easily managed. When I tend to test cases, I tend to look at doing a quick and dirty cable management, something that's not going to take a bunch of effort, because most people don't want to spend a lot of time back here. They want to get their system up and running. As you can see, you're able to snap everything together really easily. It all comes together really well. They include, one thing I will give them credit for, is they include a fan hub right here, which has 3 PWM headers, which are fully controllable. You plug the PWM header off of the controller directly into the motherboard. And then it has 6 3-pin headers. What I like is that, unlike some we're seeing right now, this actually has standard 3-pin and standard 4-pin. None of the special proprietary fan connectors or any of that crap that's going to cause you a lot of problems. As you can see, you got 3 3.5-inch drive bays or drive caddies, whatever you want to call them. These fit 3.5, but also have holes so that you can fit 2.5. So you can fit a whole bunch of SSDs in this thing, and especially with people with SSD pricing dropping so massively, a lot of people are going M2 and 2.5-inch SSD now. It's great to see that everything pretty much can accommodate that, because I think the days of large spinny drives or large mechanical drives are definitely going to be going south here pretty quick. So being able to install those is definitely a plus. Other than that, I mean, the amount of room behind this tray for cable management is about 1 knuckle, or figure about 18 to 20 millimeters right at the lip. There's a little more with the panel in place because it sits on top of this, but otherwise figure you got about that, which is plenty of room to hide these fully sleeved cables, along with a little extra room on the side. So I think you could easily cable manage even a pretty beastly multi-GPU setup with a lot of different connections going back here. One really nice thing Fractal also included is in the accessory pack, there is a triple SATA breakout, so that you can run a single SATA power connector here, and then it goes up and daisy chains to all 3 drives. Makes it real nice and clean. Makes it a lot easier to cable manage because it's almost exactly sized, just barely over exactly sized, to be able to hook to each drive without issue. So that's a plus. Now let's go ahead and spin around and take a look at any other special things we might want to talk about in this case. The rear of the MEshify S2 has an included 140 mil, but has support for 120 or 140. Has 7 total PCIe expansion brackets, along with 2 vertical. Now, the 2 vertical cannot be used unless you buy their additional PCIe riser cable. It is not included with the case, so that is an extra cost. I'm not 100% sure on the cost on that, but if I can find it, I will definitely link it down in the description. Also, you will see the PSU. Focus. Come on, do it. There we go. PSU has 2 thumb screws on the bracket, 1 on each side. And basically, you screw that bracket on, slide the PSU in, as long as it's not one like my Intermax power supply, which the screws protruded a little too much and it wouldn't fit. So I actually had to pull the fan grill completely off to get it to go in. That's obviously not the fault of Fractal. That is just the PSU itself, and it is what it is. Now, it is worth mentioning as we kind of pan through our full system build here, that this case comes in the market around $149 US, $149.99. It has multiple options: smoked window, non-smoked window. It can be procured for a $10 lower MSRP if you decide to go away from the tempered glass window like this one has and go into the solid metal panel. If you go with a solid black panel case, you can expect to pay about $139 MSRP, probably soft price a little lower coming soon. Otherwise, they also have a white variant, which also has a tempered glass panel, coming in at the same $149 price point. So that about wraps it up for this case. I mean, it did, I guess the only thing we could also mention was during our testing, the thermals were extremely good so far. I mean, we haven't had a lot of cases to test yet. We will start including charts as we have more cases to compare to. This system with 8700K, RTX 2060 from MSI, the Gaming Z card. This thing has 0 fans, so it sat idle at like 25C and didn't exceed like 63C under full bench load, even synthetic loading. The CPU, obviously with a non-blower style cooler, got a bit hotter because it's exhausting heat right into the case. So we saw right around, I want to say mid to high 70s on the CPU, more than capable with the air cooler that's applied to it, which is a Scythe Kuma, I believe, revision B. I can always update that later. But basically, the Fractal Design MEshify S2 is, for all intents and purposes, a Define S2 with a MEshify front end. And I think that about covers it. I mean, obviously there's some changes to the I/O on the front, changes to the front panel to be a MEshify case. Other than that, there's not a lot else to say besides the fact that this thing is structurally rigid. When I built this thing, there was not a lot that I could say bad about it, minus the inability to completely remove the front panel without pulling all the cables. I mean, other than that, there's not a lot you can really say negatively toward this case, except there's some limitations as far as what you can do without completely removing it. And I really wish they just stuck with the standard tooling of the S2 front I/O and just built a MEshify panel around that so that it can slot into it. You'd have the expanded connectivity. A lot there we really could have done to make it just a lot better. And there you have it. As you can see, the Define S2. Is it for you? Well, with a $149.99 price tag at launch, MSRP, obviously you have some soft prices going lower, maybe some places even gouging a little higher. At the end of the day, figure $149, it's right around what the R6 and the Define S2 launched at, so it's got some stiff competition. Omissions aside, let's say the connectivity doesn't really bother you. It's a solid as hell operating case. I mean, this thing just works. So I really don't see any reason why I couldn't recommend it. Obviously, if you can get past the fact, you know, that like the connectivity thing, the fact that now the I/O stuck to the front panel, which means you've got some special extras, I guess you can call it. As far as how you want to work with this, what you'd have to do to make it work for you, what you have to do to maintain it, you know, like for instance, pulling the front panel away, obviously you're not going to pull the cables every time. So with that being said, as long as you can deal with those small things, and I call them small things, to some people they'll be bigger, like to myself, but at the end of the day, they are pretty small with the overall package you have here. And I don't see any reason why we couldn't recommend this. This case is solid, it cools well, it fits a lot of cool stuff, has a lot of water cooling capability built in if that's your thing. Otherwise, it will air cool, as you see here, just fine. But if you want to go crazy water cooling, this thing can fit some pretty stout components. Obviously, 140mm clearance at the top is not going to be so awesome, so probably stick to a 120 base cooler. But other than that, Fractal definitely did a damn good job with the MEshify S2. I just wish they had made some other choices with the top front I/O area, but obviously, no, I don't think I've ever come across a product that's been absolutely perfect, and this one just falls right into that. But overall, it's a damn fine case for a $149 price point. There's nothing you can really fault on it. The build quality is just flat out solid. And with that, I want to thank you guys for joining, taking a look at my thoughts on this, and I truly appreciate you just taking a look at my videos and hearing me out and seeing my opinion on these things. I know you guys have a lot of options, so I truly appreciate you taking the time and taking the time just to look at my videos. And I really hope you like this. If you have some feedback, feel free to leave it in the comments. If there's something you'd like to see me talk about, something you'd like to see me do, let me know, and I will definitely, if it sounds fun, sounds like something that would make a cool video, then I might consider it. And once again, hey, thanks for watching, thanks for joining, and you guys have a great day. If you like what you see here and you want to get the newest content from Bare Metal Tech right away, be sure to subscribe, tick the bell, go to our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, give those a like, join the community, so that you will see not only the newest content going up, but also some behind the scenes as we release pictures of new stuff, or even some behind the scenes small video clips showing some of the bloopers, fun stuff we do here, along with the newest stuff we are playing with that'll be coming out in videos soon.